I think that no matter how long you've been in business, you are constantly redefining what success means to you, what it means as a human, as a partner, as a parent, and more specifically for today's conversation, as a business owner. That is why I'm super excited to be having a conversation with Maggie Patterson today. And we're really going to be talking about why it is okay to stay small. Maggie, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Ah, so, I got your pitch and I'm kind of familiar with who you are. I think we have a lot of like business friends in
Mutuals,
common.
yes.
Yeah. And when I saw you in my inbox, I was like, oh, like this is perfect timing because I have been doing what I would consider to be a lot of reevaluation of my business. I mean, I have been very successful by lots of metrics that we could talk about and most people want for their business, but in the last few years I've kind of scaled back down, mostly because my physical and mental health needed me to kind of come back and be a little smaller. But I've also been like really focusing on who I'm talking to because I would rather run a business where I am really serving my people to where I'm not constantly trying to market to do this one thing when I could just be really happy with where I'm at. And so I am really excited that that's what we're going to be talking about today.
And I think what you just said about the reevaluation, I feel like it's a really natural thing that happens to people at multiple points in their business. And you go, wait a second, this isn't working for me. And the capacity part, your mental health, your physical health, like that is true for so many of us. Yet we just keep chasing after things and we don't necessarily slow down often until we're really truly burnt out or we have some sort of life event that causes us to go, wait a second, this actually doesn't work for me at all.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just going to like jump right in with the six figures because I feel like six-figure business is so sexy to say. Lots of people make it their dream. But like Maggie, why is it that a lot of people feel like six figures is the success measurement that we should all be going towards?
Well, it really comes back to that at some point, some celebrity entrepreneur on the internet decided to call their program, 6 steps to six-figure success. And then it kind of gets in the zeitgeist. And then we just all think like a six-figure business is normal when the metrics actually don't show that that's true. It's something like only 11% of women-owned businesses actually ever cross the six-figure mark. And that's not to say you can't do it, but I always like to give people that perspective. And like in the US, 80% of the businesses are one-person businesses. Yet
Mhm.
when we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about owning a business, it's always big teams. It's like the Shark Tank. We've got a product, we're doing all the things. And the reality is entrepreneurship is generally one-person businesses who are making less than six figures.
Mhm.
And yet we all compare ourselves to, oh, I hear this a lot from my clients. I'm only. And I'm like, hold on a second. What do you mean you're only? Like you've created something out of nothing. And that is something I want people to celebrate and recognize that there's nothing wrong with you or how you're doing business.
Yeah, I can't remember what episode it is. I think that it's episode 20. I was talking with my good friend Mickey Wilson, and we were talking about the fact that there is a ceiling at 50K. Everybody talks about six figures, and there was this number, and I really wish that I could remember what the stat was, but it was like, only I don't know, I'm going to throw out a number. Only 40% of women owned businesses ever hit 50K. And it's like, we're always talking about six figures, but like the ceiling turns out that it's much lower than that. And so I feel like there needs to be like a lot more conversation about hitting the smaller goals, the steps that it takes to get to a six-figure business. If that is what you really need, let's talk about hitting that 50K first, because that is something definitely to celebrate. And we all have our different versions of success or what we specifically need to like function in our life. Because I live in Colorado, and I feel like having a six-figure business here is very different than having a six-figure business in, say, rural Missouri. Like
And
your money goes
yes,
further.
yeah, I always used to joke like with people, I'm like, I'm Canadian. So I don't have a health premium, thank goodness. Like I have I have a partner with benefits. So my life situation dictates a certain financial requirement. Like I'm just finishing up putting my kid through college. So that has been very resource intensive. Now I get to be like, okay, maybe we can make a little less money because
Mhm.
I've done that. I can check that off my list. And I think recognizing like what is true for you and what enough looks like for you. I think we start the business and we get seduced by these things. And going back to what you were saying about the $50,000, when I was writing my books called Staying Solo, I did so much research. And one of the stats, like I just keep repeating over and over, is the average one person business in the United States makes an average of $46,000.
Wow.
And that is like small business administration. And yet, when you get into the online world, it's six figure, multi six figure, seven figure now. It's constantly moving the goalposts. And it really makes people feel like they're doing something wrong, they're missing something, or this one I hear a lot, I don't have a real business because I don't have employees, or I don't have this, totally irrelevant number. And the reality is are you making money? Do you have a business? Yes, yes. Like, stop looking outside to these people who are literally trying to make you feel bad to sell you something.
And I feel like we don't actually get a lot of education. I mean, let's actually take a step back.
Yeah,
I started my business as a photographer, and there is no degree, there is no training that I needed in order to be a photographer or to start a business. Like, that is just
yeah,
not something that exists. The entry point is very low. I don't know if it's this low everywhere, but in the United States, I mean, I could pay $50 for my LLC in Colorado and have a fully functioning business. But I feel like a lot more of us need like some kind of education on the business side, not just in how to run a business, but how to actually figure out what it is that you want for your business. And so if we come back to the money,
yeah.
I already gave the example of I live in Colorado, which is one of the most expensive states in the United States to live in. But my like resources, what I need to live comfortably is very different than other places. It's also
Yeah.
very different because of my household. Like you already mentioned, you have a partner with benefits. I often joke around, that's my favorite part of my husband is that I
Same.
never have to worry about my health care because I'm not a very unhealthy person, but when I'm not healthy, oh, it costs a lot of money. And even with our insurance, I recently just paid off a hospital bill in which I think it was in the span of 15 months. I went to the emergency room twice. And after insurance, with like my deductibles and my max out of pocket, I still walked away with $9,000 that
Yeah.
I owed the hospitals. And so, I mean, that's a huge chunk of money for anybody, and specifically for self employed people who don't actually have a partner with benefits where you're paying way more for your healthcare. But I'm sorry, I don't really mean to go in the weeds, but let's take a step back. What are the steps that someone needs to take to make a reasonable monetary revenue goal for their business?
So I really encourage people to set their salary goal first, because the revenue goal, so many times, we pick an arbitrary number, $50,000, but then we don't account for all the, costs of running the business. Oh, I've got to pay a lawyer for this. Oh, I have a bookkeeper. And even if you're running really lean, you do have expenses. So, $50,000 and you're like, but I want to pay myself $50,000. The math is not mathing. So really starting with, on a personal level, how much money do I need to be bringing in every single month? And then doing a reverse salary calculation, saying, this is what I need to be taking out of the business every month. These are my expenses. These are my taxes. Oh, look, now if it's maybe $5,000 I want to bring out every month, I actually need to be making $8,000 in my business, and then figuring it out from there. Because so many times what I see is people really overspending in their businesses,
Mhm.
and that is to their personal detriment. And that is the hill I will 100% die on. I want people to get paid, because doing business where you're like just eking out a little tiny small amount and paying yourself last is a recipe for frustration and resentment.
And I will say, I don't think like we set a reasonable salary for ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
then there are some non-negotiables like taxes.
Yes.
Everybody pays taxes and everybody dies. That are the only two things that are guaranteed in life. So you have to account for that. But then when we talk about outsourcing, because you already mentioned, maybe you need to hire a lawyer for this, maybe you have bookkeepers, maybe in the case of photographers, you're paying for editing. Like there end up being a lot of expenses on top of that. But some of those are not as necessary as we lead ourselves to believe. And so if we make our salary that non-negotiable first rung, and then we build on top of that, that is going to help you figure out what your revenue goals are to make sure that at the end of the year you haven't run like a hobby, like you actually have a business
Yes.
and you have paid yourself and you have been able to pay for the expenses that are actually necessary for you to deliver the service that you do.
Yeah, and so much I encourage my clients, like, create a budget at the beginning of the year. Decide, where do I need upskilling for, my design or whatever my services are? What subscriptions do I need? Really plan ahead so that we're not having these emotional reactions when we see something on the internet and we're like, I feel kind of bad about myself today. Yeah, I think I need a new coach and they have a sale on like a 3-pack. Like, do you really need that? And it's not that I don't want people to invest in their business. I want them to invest in a really strategic and intentional way.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of us don't talk about the fact that it's okay, at least in my opinion, it's okay if you don't pay yourself what you need in the beginning. Like there are some,
Absolutely.
you have to grow into the business that you want. But if you've set your salary goal and you're still 4 years in and you are nowhere near your salary goal, you are not running the profitable business that is actually going to be sustainable in the long run. And, I was talking to you today. I really should have like written these stats out. But at least for photographers, three years in is a major milestone. And it is for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other entrepreneurs. But in particular, I have just found through all of the women photographers that I have coached that at 3 years is when everybody kind of runs out of steam. They all of a sudden realize, okay, I can't keep this as an expensive hobby forever. Like
Yep.
I either need to do this, or the quote that I hate is I need to go get a real job. Like that really hurts my feelings when I hear people say it. But it is also that point where a lot of people have to make a decision. You're either going to go all in. You've now realized that going at the speed that you're at with the salary goal that you had and the revenue and the pricing that you currently have, it's not going to get you where you need to go. And you need to kind of have a reality check of, okay, I really want my business to work. What is it going to take to actually get to the salary that I need?
Yeah. And I love that the way you're talking through it is like asking yourself that set of very strategic questions to plan and not just do kind of wishful revenue planning. Like, oh, it'll all work out. Yes, sometimes we have to leave some room for some magic. We have all experienced that in our business, but we also need a plan for, like, if we look at a photographer, your wedding photographer, there's X number of weekends in a year that you can actually work. You can't book more than that. Like, it just doesn't exist. So what levers do you have at that price? Is it a different clientele? Is it a different type of service? Is it your pricing? Like, you've got to look at all those potentials available to you because you can't just create more weekends for you to shoot weddings.
Time is the one thing in particular, depending on what your service is, that you cannot create more of.
Exactly.
You can, in some cases, lower your expenses. You can, in some cases, increase your revenue by raising your prices. You can, in some cases, outsource some of the things that you don't need to do so that you have more time to do the actual revenue generating activities in your business. But you cannot increase your capacity if you're already at capacity, other than perhaps, hiring some associates or, becoming an agency, but that's an entirely different model. You and I today are talking about, mostly solopreneurs running your, one-to-one service business. Like once you hit your capacity, there is nowhere else to go. And so if your salary needs and your overall revenue goals are not being met, you have some strategic decisions to make.
Yeah, and a lot of times what I find is those strategic decisions, and I see people resist this a lot. Those strategic decisions often mean going back to the very beginning, figuring out who you're serving, How am I positioning things? How am I packaging things? How am I marketing myself? And I've had this conversation so many times, especially in last year with the market changing so much and spending habits changing. And I'm like, I hate to tell you, you're going to keep going back to this in your business, and the fundamentals never go out of style. So like, if you're really struggling with those things, go back and revisit all those foundations you built your business on.
Yeah, I recently did a webinar. It was called Untapped Revenue. And what I was trying to bring to the surface is because I am in a position right now where I just hate marketing. I hate that all of us feel like we're on this constant hamster wheel of creating content to bring in new leads. And a lot of people are not looking at the leads that already exist inside their CRM to make sure that you are maximizing your revenue there. And so, one of the things that I've been talking about over and over again is looking at the leads that you got that didn't actually book you, and also
Yep.
looking at the clients that have already paid you money to see what else you could potentially offer them. Because, like that cost of acquisition, we all have an amount of money, even if you're not doing ads. A lot of people are like, oh, Coley, I'm not running ads. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. Like the amount of time that you spend marketing your business is a cost for each lead and each booked client that you bring into your business. And so, again, it's the whole time thing. We only have so much time to service our clients. We also only have so much time to market our business. And you cannot run a business without doing both. You just can't. Even if you are doing a retainer business and you are full, eventually one of those retainer clients are going to leave, and you're going to have some form of marketing to fill their spot. And so, I just feel like I've been talking about this so much because, at the end of the day, if you aren't hitting your revenue goals, we can all raise our prices. That is
Yeah.
always an option that you have. But typically, and I would say a good amount of the time, that's not the most strategic decision that you can make.
Yeah.
Raising your prices lowers the number of people that could come into your business. And if you are actually profitable for the service that you're currently providing at that price point, yes, raising your prices will bring in more revenue, but you might actually price yourself out of the current clients that you love working with and all these things. I mean, I know people hearing me right now are like, oh, Coley, but you tell everybody to raise their prices. I sure do. But I actually want you to look at the revenue inside your business before you do that. And so, looking at the revenue, again, is like all the things that Maggie and I have been talking about today, not just how much money is coming in, but where is it going? And is a big chunk of it going to yourself? Because I feel real sad if I hear that you are paying your contractors more than you are paying yourself.
I've
Like,
oh and this is the one that gets me a lot of times. Like someone will be and they're like, you need to hire a project manager, a VA, fill in the blank, whatever it is, photo editor. And what people don't realize is they've now are responsible for that person. They are now, and a lot of times I'll hear from people like, I don't even really know what I'm supposed to do with them. And I'm
ooh,
like, ooh, you're paying for them and you're feeling like unsupported and like they're underutilized. That's not a good use of your money. And I think we've been conditioned to think of hiring as this like kind of I made it moment. Like, look at me, I'm legit now. I got a contractor. And if you need help, please get it, but be very clear on why you're getting it. Don't just do it because you think that it's like a checkbox or the natural next step. Some of the most successful solo service business owners I have had, you know, time to work with or just know through different friends, they are very much a one person show. And they have, like you said, made a series of very strategic decisions around all aspects of their business. They've gone and looked for how can I increase revenue per client? They've done all those things. They're really thinking about every little bit of the business and trying to maximize the potential of it.
I've had a couple episodes on this podcast where we talk about hiring. And just to kind of put things out there for you, I went from really only having bookkeepers and, photo editing, but I didn't have a contractor that was doing that for years. I only paid when I needed the photos to be edited. I was using a bigger company. Actually, they were in Canada. And then eventually I had an individual contractor that I would send my sessions to. But that wasn't an expense that I was really responsible for every single month because it was totally driven
Yeah.
by the actual clients that I was working with. I shoot a session, I need to send it to an editor. So, that aside, September 2023. No, September 2022. I actually went from no contractors to two contractors in a single week. I hired my podcast manager and I hired my VA. And my VA is someone who was knowledgeable enough in Dubsado from the beginning to where I could actually hand her revenue generating
Yes.
activities where she was helping me with my Dubsado builds. Like eventually we had like this really well-oiled machine where I would do the strategy call. I would kind of gather all the information and do the plan. And then she could actually go in there the day before I did the VIP day and prep everything. She would add all the email templates. She would make sure that, the proposal templates were in there and that my client's information was in. I mean, it saved so much time, but I know lots of people don't use their VA in that way. So I often kid that, Sarah paid for herself from the beginning. Now, my
Yeah.
podcast manager, on the other hand, I feel like, and I say this to her and I publicly say it. Hey, Haley, you're listening. I love you. She did not pay for herself for a really long time. But now in the year of 2025, in my new signature offer, Systems in Session, every single person who has entered this container has quoted the podcast as the reason that they joined. So
Yeah.
I can now, like, with my full chest, say my podcast manager fully pays for herself.
And I think, I'm always like, if you're a writer and you need help with writing, please hire someone who's doing actual client work. That is what I did in the beginning. And it was the best thing I could have done because I didn't have to train someone on something I don't really understand in the first place. Right. And I mean, it's easier to be like, oh yeah, they're making money. It's good. Not every role that you might need support for is going to make money, but also sometimes it's going to be like, I just need to get this off my plate. Like I started off doing my own bookkeeping. That was a very bad idea.
The funny thing is, I love doing my books. I only hired bookkeepers because I myself, like, I was thinking the number of hours that I spend to actually do my own books. Oh no, I could make way more money if I just worked with more
Yeah.
clients. And plus, I was one of those people. I didn't avoid my books because I have a phobia of numbers. I just avoided my books because I didn't want to do it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm one of
Fair.
those people right before taxes. I tell this, I would lock myself in my office for 3 days straight, barely eating, so that I could then categorize every expense that I'd had for the whole year. I'm looking at every single time I drove to a client's house to do my mileage. And this is like, 15 months later.
Yep.
I
This
don't do
sounds
that
very
anymore.
familiar.
I
Yeah.
mean,
This is
right?
why we just don't do that anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to hiring, because again, you do work with a lot of people who are staying small and staying solo, but what is the typical first hire that people that you are working with end up doing? Because I assume they're trying to stay small as long as possible, but like what ends up being that role for most of your clients where they really do see that it is helping them grow their business or it's, giving back their sanity, if you will?
So outside of like those kind of professional service providers like that you're going to use periodically, like an accountant or a bookkeeper,
Mhm.
generally because I work with creatives or consultants, they're getting someone who can help them very specifically with the thing they do. So the copywriters are hiring a copywriter or an editor or a researcher. The designers are, getting someone who could do the brand logo concepts. They're hiring people who generally do what they do. And it's a lot of time for them, it's about a collaboration and really helping them deliver better client work and taking some stress off their plate versus
Mhm.
being like, I want to be it. I want to have a giant team. A lot of them are just like, yeah, I'm a little overburdened right now. I need to bring some people in on some projects that I trust, and that will make everything better for me and for the end client.
Yeah. So, how is it that someone goes about making the decision on whether or not that is a good hire or not? Because we've already talked kind of like number wise when it comes to setting your revenue goals, salary comes first. Is there a metric that people should consider before they're going to make their first hire, especially if it is kind of like hiring a body double, hiring somebody that does the same thing that you do?
I wish I had there's lots of metrics I've seen lots of people use. For me, it comes down to, are you hiring them ongoing? And if you're hiring them ongoing, like, do you have the ability to withstand the ups and downs? Like, let's say you're hiring them as a part-time employee. Can you withstand the ups and downs cash flow in your business so that you can pay that salary consistently. Because the last thing anyone wants to do is like, hey, come for me part-time, and then be like 2 months later, oh, the client roster's dropped, peace out. So that's
Mhm.
the first thing to really consider. And the second thing is like, if you're bringing them in on a project basis, is have you budgeted and priced this project for your client in a way that you have the layers you need and the profit you need to actually pay this person? Because where I see this really go wrong is people will book a bunch of projects, they're freaking out, they're running around, and then they're like, oh, I need help. And then the person they actually want is like the same rate as them.
Mhm.
And then it's like, there is no profit to be had. Like, yes, it's removing some stress, but it's not actually generating any money for the business. So making sure that you're having, your business season is like March. Have the conversations with those collaborators, find out their rates, price those projects with those people in mind.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the pieces of advice that I give photographers is August and September is not the time for you to find an editor. I mean,
Yeah.
they're feeling overwhelmed with the number of galleries on their computer, and then they're like, "Oh, I need to hire somebody to help me." Yeah, then you don't have any wiggle room to go back and forth with them and make sure that you've kind of gotten the editing down, and that what they're going to give you is not going to end up costing you more time in fixing it. You want to make sure that you've got that relationship. And what you're saying is totally true. For whatever your service is, if you're going to hire somebody in that capacity, you need it a few months before your busy season to make sure that you've worked out all the kinks, to make sure that the people that you are presenting proposals to hire you, that you have already, I mean, I don't know if there's a better word to say than pad, but you need to add that layer
Yeah.
of what it's going to cost you to bring on this person on a project basis, to make sure that you yourself are not, I mean, you might get paid less, but you certainly don't want your hourly rate to drop. There is a difference. There is a
Yes.
difference between you making less on a project because you did less work versus you making less and it's actually like not meeting the hourly salary that you have already established for yourself.
Yeah, and like, here's the thing, Coley. Like, I've never seen a reactive emergency level, high drama, I'm very stressed hiring decision work out really well. Because people are just like, I need a body. Who can do this? I'm going to throw money at the problem. And I get the impulse to throw money at the problem, but you're already in a heightened state. You're probably over your capacity. Your nervous system is shot. You're probably not going to be very helpful or communicating well with that person. And I think we have to think, like, when we are bringing people into our business, like, how do we want to be leading them? How do we want to be communicating with them? Like, there are hidden costs in that beyond actually doing the work.
And it's so funny that you mentioned that. And I don't think that I had like this epiphany. I just did it once and then I was like, oh my God, that is brilliant. Some of the people in systems in session, when we're doing your systems, your client experience systems, and we've been doing to do tasks, one of the first people to go through the program, when he was writing his to-do task, I was like, no, wait, like you need more detail there. I was like, I understand that you know what that means,
Yeah.
but in the future, if you ever decide to hire a virtual assistant or you need somebody to come behind you because you're incapacitated or something, like
Yep.
you need SOPs. And if you're not going to write SOPs separately, then they need to be built into like your workflows so that when there is a to-do task, it doesn't just say send reminder. It has the client's name. It has what kind of reminder it is. It has which template you're using and how you actually send that form, that reminder inside of the to-do task so that if you are not the person looking at it, the person looking at it is able to follow it. And so I've actually had a couple people who came back and hiring a virtual assistant wasn't even on their radar. But like, I think 3 of my clients now have hired a virtual assistant about 6 weeks after leaving my program. And they're like, oh my gosh, like you were right on with those to-do tasks. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't do that for myself. So I'm glad I was able to help you with that.
And here's the thing, even if you're never going to hire someone, like, the systems thing, even as a solo business owner, you can't rely 100% on your brain. Because you set up that system 6 months ago, however long ago, and you come back and you're like, what did I even mean? So, and you don't have to over engineer your systems, but, do I have templates? Do I have tools? Do I have some documented process? Do I understand the workflow? Instead of doing this, like, I haven't had a new client in a while. What do I do again?
What do I do? I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. Or like, how do I even do that in tool XYZ? And like, it seems really onerous because you're like, oh, I got it. And it's like, think of how much time you waste trying to figure things out because you just could have created a loom, ran it through AI and documented the process. It would have been super simple.
Okay, Maggie, I feel like we've talked about a lot of concrete things. Like,
Yeah.
make sure that you're setting, realistic revenue goals, make sure that you're starting with your salary, be very careful and strategic when you go to hire. I feel like now I kind of want to turn the conversation to like mindset because comparison is the thief of everything.
Yeah.
I even find myself on social media on threads, and I haven't been on Instagram in a while because I do really feel like I get on there and you see how well, in quotes, everybody is doing, and you start to think to yourself, am I doing enough? Like, if I did this, would this be happening to me? And so, do you ever coach people on like that mindset? And like, what advice do you give to people so that they really do stay in their lane and they keep their eyes on their own paper?
Yeah, it's funny because I always say to people, like, don't come to me as a consultant to like do mindset work with you. But you invariably end up doing it because they'll say, like, oh, this makes me feel bad. And it's like, let's get to the root of the problem. And am very clear with people, like, what you see on the internet is not true. I host an
Mhm.
entire second podcast about the dupe to the dark side of online business that's like talking about this from a consumer perspective. Things are not what they seem. So I think a healthy dose of skepticism as you are doing your doom scroll and maybe start limiting that time. The other thing is too recognizing that everyone is in a different season. Everyone has different resources, different privileges. And like when you go, oh, I'm like looking at this person, maybe they started their business 15 years ago.
Yes.
Maybe they had a trust fund. You don't have the full story. And people so rarely that I find people look at you for aspiration are actually candid about all the advantages they had and everything that's gone into their business. We either get the sob story and like how they've overcome everything, or we get the shiny version, right? Like there is no in between. They're not keeping it real at all. So I think being very careful about who you follow, whose podcasts you listen to. I think it's so much more productive to listen to people who are more like you in their worldview, their stage of business, the
Hmm.
season of business. It's like, if you're the mom of a toddler, you
Yes.
probably want, and you're really trying to figure out your time management, you probably don't want to be listening to a podcast from a 20-year-old dude who's totally clueless.
Yes. It's funny. I don't actually, I mean, I talk about how I grew my business a lot on other people's podcasts, but then you really don't do it on your own podcast, right?
Yeah.
But every time I get people that drop into my Instagram and they're like, "Okay, Coley, like you seem to do everything. Everything seems to be, in order." And I have to say, you realize I just celebrated 13 years of business. You
Yeah.
realize that I didn't really get like really going until I was almost 8 years in because my kid was at home with me.
Yep.
I literally grew my business and increased my capacity and those kinds of things every time my kid went to another day of school. Like I
Yep.
started my business with 2 days a week, 2.5 hours on each of those days. That's all I had.
Yeah.
And then, she went 3 half days. And then she went 3 half days or 3 full days and an afternoon. And then she went 5 full days. And then when she went to elementary school and she went to full time kindergarten, y'all, I thought I had made it. And then I joined the PTA.
Yeah.
And so
The
then I was
worst choice.
volunteering twice a
Yeah.
week. Yeah. I mean, so, I still didn't have all this time. And when we talk about like the six figures, I am more than happy to share with anybody who wants to know. I didn't hit six figures until I was 8 years in business. I came really close one year and then I went blind, literally went
Oh my
blind.
gosh. Okay.
And
Yeah.
then, yeah, I mean, and then
Priorities.
it set me back like 8 months. But like, I didn't really, I've never really until the last few years had a full like school day or a full business day in order to work. And so I don't want you looking at what I'm doing right now in 2025, 13 years in with only one kid who's 15 and can do anything that I need her to do on her own. She walks back and forth from school. She'll cook her own dinner. I mean, my husband helps too, but whatever. The kid is self-sufficient now. But like, don't look at me and be like, oh, but this is what I want when you still have two toddlers running around. Like, we don't have the same life. Now, if you want to have a conversation with me about what it was like when my kid was strapped to my back and I was editing photos, that's a conversation that's a little bit more realistic for us to have.
And I think being realistic about the capacity you have as an individual, whether that be due to like aging parents, kids, neurodivergence, mental health, physical, like we've all got different conditions at different times going on. Like, you know, I got to the teen years and then I started dealing with aging parents. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to switch gears and focus on that. Like, there's been so many phases over my 20 plus years being in business, and like looking at where I am today, it's like, I'm not dealing with any of that right now. So of course I have more time and energy to invest in the business, and that's okay. And I think one thing I always really want to remind people of is hire people or work with people because you respect them, and you feel like they're very honest and forthcoming about their business journey. Don't hire them because you want their business.
Yes. But I mean, let's talk about it though, because that's the advice that people give you. Oh, you need somebody to be, in order to help somebody, you only have to be 10% ahead of them. Or, when you're looking for a business coach, hire somebody who's doing the thing that you want to do. And that's not always the best fit.
No.
So I agree with you, but that is the advice that these newbie business owners get 24/7.
Yeah, and it's always usually tied to money. Like,
Mhm.
you want a six-figure business, then you go work with the business coach six-figure extravaganza program or whatever it is, right? Like, there's always those people, but I think also slow down, watch people for a while. Like, watch for the income claims, watch for the stories that don't quite add up, look for those things and be like, okay, wait, what is their motivation here? Because the best coaches, the best consultants I have ever worked with, and that I know personally, they are not flashy on the internet. They are too busy serving their clients. They are excellent at their craft, and they are the people that are going to show up for you in ways that you could not expect.
I feel like you and I would get along so well because I'm that person that's very skeptical. I personally do not react well to money marketing. And what I mean
Oh,
by that is, people telling me if I do this, I can just make this amount of money. Because then in my head, I cannot turn the skepticism off. I'm like, okay, but no, now I want to see like, what are your expenses and how long did it take you to get there? And like, how much helped you? Like, I want to know all of the
yes.
questions.
Yeah.
And I can't turn that part of my brain off, to save my life. But then when I'm looking at like what it is that I do like, I like people who are giving me like concrete things that I will get, but that aren't money related. And so there was this trend, I want to say it was like 2, 3 months ago. People were like, giving people time is not what you're selling. So stop talking about it. And I wrote this really long rant. I'm like, no, time is what I'm selling my people. Yes, they
Yeah.
all feel better about their business. They feel more confident. Most of my people raise their prices, which then gives them more money. They create these proposals that people are actually booking them faster than ever, which means more money. But like, that's not what I want to promise you. I want
Yeah.
to promise you that what I'm giving you is going to give you 10 extra hours a week. Now, whether you choose to remarket your business, take on more clients, or just have a freaking day of self care and take your family on a vacation, that's totally up to you. But I am selling you time, and I'm not shy about telling you this is the result that I want you to come for me for. You will end up with more money, but I cannot force myself to like write a sales page that's like, work with me and I'll increase your booking rate by 30%. Like, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to me as like what I like from a copywriting perspective, what is the strongest believable claim? Like, I know in general, my clients make more money. I don't say you're going to 2x or 10x or whatever, but more importantly, I know like the time thing. I saw that conversation and it really irked me. So I'm glad you brought it up because here's the thing. My clients are very capacity conscious. They very much want their life to be their priority. And at the end of the day, getting some time back is the most important thing to most of them at this point.
It is.
So please don't tell me it's not time. And the income claim marketing, it's tired, it's played out. Everyone, please be skeptical about it.
But it's so shiny, Maggie. It's so
I
like, oh my
know.
gosh, I really want this. And if I don't have this right now, I must be doing something wrong. Even if you don't need it. Like, again, this brings us back to the very beginning of our conversation. Do you actually know what you need? Like, have you worked with a money coach or a business coach in general that actually sat your ass down and told you, can you tell me what your home expenses are? Can you tell me what portion you need to pay? I mean, that is where we're starting to get a realistic idea of your salary. I mean, because you can always just try to replace the salary that if you had a 9 to 5, let me say
Yeah.
that. If you had a 9 to 5, do you want to replace it? And I've never been shy about saying that was literally never my goal, because I made so much money before I opened my business. Like, if that was, I would have quit a long time ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my salary goal in the beginning was, I looked at what my husband was making, like, annually, and I divided it by how many hours he was going to work. And I'm like, I just want to make sure that every hour that I am putting into this business, that I am making the same amount of money that my husband was. And I mean, like, if he was making $100 an hour, I'm not saying that I wanted to make $100 in revenue an hour. I'm saying after I paid my taxes, after I paid my expenses, I want to make sure that for every hour that I'm spending, I am making at least as much as my husband. And that was my standard for years. I mean, almost a decade of owning my own business. That was the goal. I just want to make sure that my time is as valued as my partner, because we're bringing different things to the table. I
Yes.
was a stay-at-home mom for a very long time, plus running my business. But like, my husband went to work at his 9 to 5, and as we both said, partner with benefits. He gave us the health insurance, and he was paying the mortgage and all of these things. And at the end of the day, I just wanted to make sure that he could never say he was actually making more than me based on the time that each of us were putting into our jobs.
And I think what you said about having a standard is you need some sort of standard. Like, I remember when I started my business, the conversation we had at my house was, I need to make $4,000 a month clear. And I did it very quickly. But I mean, I literally was like, I have 4 months, and if I'm not making $4,000 a month clear, I'm going back to my very well-paying corporate job.
Your very
Because
cushy job. Because you know what? There is stress when you work at a corporate job, but there is not the same kind of stress that there is when you own your own business. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that when you switch one for the other, it's really not that you're eliminating the stress, it's just a different kind of stress. So make sure that whichever one you do, it's worth it.
well, I mean, I would say choose your hard. And
Mm-hmm.
so many of my friends that I like kind of came up with early in my career that have stayed in corporate, they're like, they literally like look at me at dinner or whatever. They're like, I could never do what you do. And I'm like, I could never go to the office and put on real pants.
I mean, but see, that's what they value and that's what you value. And I feel like at the end of the day, like, there are a lot of people that would rather, I guess, make less money sounds judgmental, and that's not even what I mean. But like, there is comfort in knowing that your paycheck is steady. There is comfort in knowing that for most people, you don't have to bring your work home. Like,
Yeah.
when my husband comes home, recently he's been like sending a few emails, but in general, when he leaves his lab and he comes home, he's not working into the night like most of us entrepreneurs have done at some point in owning our business. And so it is really, we do sacrifice to own our own businesses, but I think you have to make sure that at the end of the day that the sacrifice is worth it, and that you are not sacrificing your peace of mind to grow just because you have felt some kind of pull to do so because of external forces and not an internal need to actually grow your business, which I feel like brings us around full circle to what we were
Well,
talking about
it
today.
comes back to like, what is the underlying motivation? Like, some people really want the team, they want that bigger business. But I think, is that something you truly want, or are you doing it because you can? And we've seen so many examples of this in the online world where people just grew. And
Mhm.
then they got to the top and they're what they thought they wanted. They completely crashed out
Yeah.
because they're just like, I hate this. This is awful. Or they have a few bad months. And it's like, I think, especially, knowing the economic instability right now, like, moving very, very methodically and being extra thoughtful about what you actually want. And, I'm all for it. You go ahead and chase it, but recognize, like, it is a very different business model to have a team and be generating that revenue in that way, and a lot more responsibility. And not everyone has the grit and the patience and the drive for that.
Yeah. And I feel like I mean, we kind of skirted around this, but neither one of us said it out loud. And that's that, it's okay if your season of life dictates your season of business. And
Yes.
I think you should be constantly checking in with yourself to make sure that the season of business and the season of life are aligned. And when they're not aligned, you have to do something about it, and you have to do something about it quickly. Because I feel like lots of people recognize when they're not aligned, but they just think it will work itself out. And then 6 months down the line, they're still in a place where the season of life doesn't match the season of business. And like, it's destroying one or the other. Your business is suffering, your personal life is suffering, or both.
Yeah. And I feel like in the last 18 months, I've seen more and more and more of this because, maybe things aren't working the same way they were in the business. Maybe something has changed in your personal life. And I think a lot of times what happens is if something has worked well for a while or it's worked for you or whatever the case is, we want to cling to it because it feels safe. When really the smartest thing for us to do is be like, okay, great, that served me. Maybe you need to switch up your packages. Maybe your clientele
Mm-hmm.
needs to shift. Maybe you need to work with a different contractor or whatever the case is. Don't be afraid to make those changes because you're going to make changes constantly in your business. And I'm not saying like you need to drop everything really quickly, but I think if you're like, oh, I'll just wait it out. I see a lot of people waiting it out right now. And I'm like, oh, maybe you do need to change your marketing. You keep telling me your lead pipeline is really slow.
Mm-hmm. I do feel like if anybody ever asked me what makes somebody most successful in business, I do think, and I don't even know that I would actually like call it risk in this conversation, but it is being able to like recognize that something needs to change and actually making the change, not
Yeah,
sitting in the indecision for a quarter, for 6 months, for an entire year before you try something new. Like, those of us that are willing to make changes and then even like turn it off if it doesn't suit us. Like this summer, I tell this story of I got this brilliant idea in less than 36 hours. I had the offer mapped out. I had the GPT completely created, and I made a full sales page. I sold it. I marketed it for 3 days. I sold it for 3 days, and I was like, no, this is not a good forward facing offer. This is not something that I want someone off the street to buy. And I completely turned it off. Now, it ended up becoming the first thing that I do in my signature offer now. So, I mean, all of that was not for naught,
yeah,
but I realized pretty quickly, oh no, like this is not something that I want to publicly sell. And a different version of me might have been like, oh, but what will people think if I just talked about it nonstop and now I don't want to sell it anymore? Nope, I don't care. I turned it off and did a podcast episode about it.
and
So,
that's part of like the more seasoned you are in your business, the more experience you have, the more you get to know that. But I think if you're constantly having it's just not working, it just doesn't
mhm.
feel right, that is information, and that's information you need to act on. I mean, a few months ago, I was planning out a private podcast. I was going to have 5 episodes. I wrote the first 2 episodes, and I was like, I kept putting off recording it. I was like, something is wrong. And then I was like, yeah, this is a stupid idea.
And isn't it good that you can tell yourself though that, and that you don't feel like you wasted the time thinking about it, writing the first 2 episodes, or that you wasted the time, like dragging your feet in order to start recording? Like you have recognized, you know what? That was my gut telling me this is not the right move. And now we can just shelve it and move on. Or maybe it comes back in a different capacity. Maybe, you will end up having an idea on something that would make it not a stupid idea
Exactly.
going forward. Yeah.
I was just like, no, wrong. And I think that the having the wisdom to be like, this is not it. This is not working. Like that is an underrated skill as a business
Yes,
owner.
it is. Maggie, I feel like we have talked about like everything
We
related to
have.
staying small, except for like where people can find out more information about you. I mean, I love the name of her business. It's going to be in the show notes, guys. But do you have any closing thoughts or any like you want people to think about this before they make their next move or before they consider growing their business?
When you think about growing your business, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, understand the underlying motivations and like what is it you're trying to solve. A lot of times I find people want to do it to just prove something to everybody. And it's like, you don't have anything to prove. Knock that off.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is recognizing that there are lots of ways to grow that don't involve hiring, that don't involve all these kind of traditional things. You could shift the types of services you offer to make more money. Like, I think defining what growth actually looks like for you in this season is the most important part. And so many times we just want to, like, we want someone to hire, hand us a little roadmap to say it should look like this. And actually the best things are going to be things you're actually figuring out based on what your clients want and what you want.
Everything is individual. None of
Yes.
us are running the same business,
No,
no matter what the business coach gurus tell you.
no,
Absolutely.
not even a little bit.
Maggie, you're going to come join me again, right? Because I feel like I'm
Absolutely.
cutting you off because you and I could just go on about this forever. Okay, so at the end of the day, my goal for every single listener is to be running a business that brings you joy and a paycheck. It is literally the tagline for this podcast, and I really mean it. And so I feel like all of us on an annual basis, every 6 months, every quarter, you should be making sure that your current season of business is aligned with your current season of life, and that before you make any major changes in your business, particularly in the area of growing it, make sure that you have thought about what it is that you want to do and why. All right, that's it for this episode. See you next time.